Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Social Impact Track of Techstars Startup Atlanta Week. My name is Sydney Hulbach, and I am honored to be one of this year's track captains for the Social Impact Track, along with Anshu Bayani. We are really glad to start off this day or this week today with Twana Harris, who is the Impact and Culture Lead of Tribal Good. She's going to walk us through our kickoff keynote. But before she starts, I just want to direct everyone to the chat. We will be fielding questions in the last 10 to 15 minutes of this presentation. So please add any questions you have for Twana along the way, and I'll be back to help facilitate that questionnaire at the end. So without further ado, Twana, please kick us off.
Good morning, everyone. Let's see if we can pull this presentation back up really quick. Application window. Uh-oh. See, this is the downside of being the first person of the day. Things get a little hairy. Let's see here, just a second. Let's see. Give us just a second. I am the first person of the day, and they went through a couple of challenges with not, let's see, hold on one second. Should be able to uncheck the share. I did uncheck the share screen. It's not pulling up my PowerPoint though. Let's see, give me a second. The presentation was there and then it disappeared. So let's see here. Let me go back to the actual presentation really quick. See, I may need a little bit of technical support. I'm sorry. It is not coming back up. Give me just a second, everyone. I'm so sorry for this delay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, hold on one second, guys. I'm actually going to have to send this presentation over to the team. Let's see. The technical challenges of today. I am okay, that is on its way. We should be up in any second now. Okay, excellent. Looks like the app is not responding right this moment. I have unchecked the box. It looks like the computer is not responding right now. It's actually stating, if you can hear me, it is actually stating that Hopin is not responding right this moment. So let me just see what I can do to troubleshoot on this end.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for your patience. While we're figuring out Chwana's presentation, I see that there's quite a few of you in the room from all over Atlanta representing different areas, so please feel free to add your name, your title, where you're calling in from in the chat. Would love to know who's in the room. So as Chwana prepares her presentation, she knows her audience this morning. While we're waiting as well, you know, this social impact track is new this year, and it was new to the Startup Week and Startup Atlanta Ecosystem Guide just a couple of years ago. So we're really excited to further bring this social impact track to life. It's been really fun working alongside Anshu and Chwana and many of our other speakers this week to see what people are working on to make Atlanta better, to really focus on the social impact and the sustainability side of things. Myself, I work with something called the Georgia Social Impact Collaborative, or GSIC, which many of you may have heard of. We're really focusing on building out the social impact and impact investing ecosystem across the state. So we realized, you know, a couple of years ago that there's all these wonderful hubs for impact across the country. So anywhere from California to New York to Boston, and we had all those same great individuals and same great pieces of infrastructure here in Georgia, but we're really lacking that connective tissue to bring that ecosystem together. So, you know, we started GSIC with this vision for building a better social impact ecosystem, socially minded ecosystem, and really trying to figure out how you drive patient capital into businesses that are doing good for people on the planet. So that was a huge inspiration behind putting this week together. We wanted to highlight the stories of those individuals that are doing good here across the state, but particularly in the metro area. Atlanta has a lot of attention on it, and it should. It's doing great things. There's wonderful movements being led here, really exciting innovations that are taking place really across the state. And we're thrilled to be able to highlight many of these speakers today, including Chwana. And I promise she's worth the wait. She has a great presentation prepared for you guys on the power of storytelling and how you can really leverage that in the creative industries to drive social impact. So we encourage you to stick around. It's very much so going to be an exciting and impactful discussion that we hope you guys will take a part of. If you have questions in the chat about the social impact track, if there's anything you want to share in terms of announcements, things you're working on that are driving impact across the city, please share. I see we have students, we have individuals from Miami, individuals from New York. So it's really great that this conference is reaching beyond just the boundaries of 285, that we're seeing faces from across the country tune in to see what's happening in Atlanta. That's something we should all be really proud of. We're going to take a quick hiatus. I think Twana is back with us and perhaps has a working PowerPoint. So let's see.
You know what? I think I may have it on this end. I had to completely shut everything down. Let's see here. Sydney, are you able to hear me?
I am. Welcome back.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay. Are you able to see the screen?
I am not.
Let's see here. See slideshow. I'm able to get the slides show up. It's just that when it's actually putting it on Hopin, there's a challenge. So let me see if this works. And you guys weren't able to do it on your end?
We were not, no.
Okay. Okay, so I think I'm going to do it without technology. I'm going to try to go through it. It's just really difficult without the actual slides themselves for you guys to get the enjoyment on your end. But let me see what I can do. Let's see, slide. And it's whenever I take it into the slideshow mode, can you see that at all?
No, we can't right now.
All right, well, let's just go through. I am, if I actually go into this, can you physically see me? Are you able to see me right now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give you guys the slide. I'm just going to go ahead and do it, without the actual slide. So thank you so much for your patience, everyone. I am here today to kind of bring you guys through the future of social impact. And what I wanted to do is to coin this as a process to where we're actually looking at the future of how we create impact to where no one is actually left behind. And I had some really amazing slides for you guys. So I'm going to actually try to post it on LinkedIn later so that everyone has an ability to kind of take us through. But long story short, this has been what an amazing week, right? So we've had unprecedented numbers when it comes to voting. And one of the things that we have to really understand is that this is one of the most controversial elections of many of our generations. And so for unprecedented numbers to come about, for the number of issues and the number of items that have been covered on our ballot to be so vast and so complex, it is really advantageous for us to really understand the actual impact of the voting that happened this year. Atlanta has a unique perspective around, our historical roots, right? And so when we talk when we talk about everything from the divisions that have taken place, the policy violence that has been leashed in our city, amongst many others, one of the things that we understand is that interstates as well as railroad tracks, different types of infrastructure of that nature have literally posed a huge challenge for us to really come together as one unified community in the South. And that has been pervasive for decades. But one of the things that you'll notice about Atlanta is that Atlanta has also had a very pronounced position as the birthplace of the civil rights movement. We have that has been over 40 years of kind of going back and forth of just like pushing the needle forward. And that is coming out of all of the different things that really happened in the South. And many of those things were actually played a front and center part in terms of this year's elections. I have some really amazing images here. It's hard for me to bring these to life, but I'll talk about a little bit of like during that particular time, you also had this like vast corporate engine that was really pushing its weight and growing exponentially in the city. And that is from, our Fortune 500s to also all the Fortune 50s and all of the Fortune 1000s. I mean, we just have an amazing, diverse set of corporations in Atlanta that have really put us on a global map. And then, of course, this is one of my favorite images. I'm so sad that you guys can't see this. But then we also had this whole new group of people that traditionally have been excluded from many of the economic opportunities and pathways in our city. And they started to create their own opportunities as well as opportunities for other people. And so this is actually a picture of Outcast. And then once we kind of move into like where we are today, so we've had these railroads and these interstates that have separated us. We've had the civil rights movement. We have all this amazing corporate innovation that's taking place, as well as historically all of the people who led political and social activism before they were ever a big thing. We now have today the Beltline. So the Beltline is an example of an infrastructure project that was designed and created to really be able to tackle a lot of the major issues throughout the city. So first and foremost, connecting 45 neighborhoods that were never designed to be connected. Again, due to the interstates, the railways. And so historically, on one side of the railways, there might be one community, and on another side of the railways, there was another community. And a lot of times you could not cross across those railways in order to connect with other people. What's interesting about today, though, is the Beltline is connecting 45 different neighborhoods that were never, ever, ever designed to be connected. And so what we're starting to see is a whole new generation of not only connectivity, but inclusivity that we're really trying to cultivate in the city. And then, oh my God, I just hate that my presentations are not available. We also have a picture of Drake, right? And so those older images around how we actually promoted Coca-Cola's presence in our city has fundamentally changed. And a lot of it has been centered around the diversity, the complexities of like different lived experiences, and how the organization, how it's really forced corporations to really come up to speed to where we are today. And then this next image, I'm just going to have to explain them to you, is 21 Savage as a cover photo for Forbes. And we started to see people to where even in Atlanta, there was not a big, huge push around his integration with DACA. However, Forbes has acknowledged him as the new voice of the immigration platform here in Atlanta. So such a testament to talent that we have historically not really recognized nor championed. And then the next image is actually downtown Centennial Park, and it's actually a Black Lives Matter protest. And so where we are today is we are in the midst of some of our toughest times as a community. So we have pandemic, we have protest around a multitude of different issues, but mostly it is around the systemic inequities that have really been pervasive in our country. And then we see a community that showcases blight that literally circumvents or surrounds the actual Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And so that's a huge testament to a lot of the inequities and the racial and economic disparities that have come to fruition in the city. And so I wanted to just like set up the frame historically and today to what we're needing to focus on, which I believe is innovation, right? So we focus a lot, there's a lot of communication around technology, there's a lot of communication around data science and all of those things, right? But at the core of all of those is that innovation is the process, or it is defined online as the process for creating value by applying novel solutions to meaningful problems. And then as we go a level deeper in that conversation, we look at what role does social impact play in that process. And it's really pushing our corporations, our major businesses, our tech organizations, et cetera, to really look at a triple bottom line impact, and that's profit, people, and planet. One of the things that you'll see, I get to a little bit later on in the presentation, is that you'll hear a lot of times, like if you actually Google social impact, there's probably 30 or 40 different definitions, but it's essentially being able to leverage assets to solve our society's greatest ills. For me, my personal definition is using our power and our resources to really improve humanity. And so as we continue to move forward, I think we have to look at like what is actually playing front and center when it comes to the media and all of the different solutions that have actually worked or not worked. And what we're seeing this growing demand for storytelling and narrative change to really be able to not only change hearts, change minds, but also ideally policy, like what we see with the Ava DuVernay's When They See Us. And then we get into, of course, the whole role of storytelling when it comes to the social dilemma and how it really brought up some of the really concrete concerns that we need to have about social media, the algorithms, and what that plays in terms of how we're surviving and how we're able to kind of push forward in our communities. And then, and then I wanted to kind of put that into context with also diversity and inclusion, right? So there's the social impact. We're doing storytelling. We're doing narrative change around people who have traditionally had inauthentic narratives that have been told about them, as opposed to the things that the contributions and the aspirations that they've actually contributed to. And so we see those things kind of play out in real life. And I just wanted to kind of take you guys through an exercise. So I have a photo with a quote from Wells Fargo, as well as a quote from Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock. And it basically showcases that right now, in this particular current time, we're at a moment to where some corporations really don't necessarily feel like they have the ability to impact change. And so, of course, Charlie Scharf, I think is how you pronounce his name. He actually was the CEO of Wells Fargo that pretty much commanded all of the front pages of every newspaper over the last couple of months around his statement around a lack of Black talent. But then on the other side, the person that I have so much respect for is Larry Fink. And I'm going to actually read you his quote because it was on my slide and you can't see it. So it says, to prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. Companies must benefit all of their stakeholders, and that is inclusive of shareholders, employees, customers, and the communities in which they operate. And I bring that all to bear to say we're at a crossroads to where we've got to decide if we're going to push this needle forward or if we're going to stand in place. And I think that all of the issues that have permeated in 2020 have really shed a light on, again, I go back to the economic and the racial disparities, but a lot of those are around narratives that have been extremely pervasive and have removed people from opportunity and has included them in the space for exclusion and othering. And then my final closing slide really just showcases a really incredible image of everyone. It's totally bipartisan, but it was everyone kind of celebrating down at 10th and Piedmont after the election was called. And so, with all of that said, I think we're at a really interesting space to where we have to now really come to the forefront and be able to, I'm sorry, technology's throwing me off a little bit, guys. Come to the forefront and really be able to decide which direction we go forth. And I think that the rest of the week's programming and planning with Techstars Week is really going to be able to shed a light on not only how do we partner with corporate innovation to make things more efficient, to bring more people into the play, to really address the problems not only with our planet, but also to address racial equity and inclusion. So thank you so much. I'm so sorry for all the technical difficulties, but I hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation today.
Thank you, Twana. And just so you know, we do have the slides currently showing. We were able to get them up a little bit into your presentation. So if there's any you want to go back to, just to underscore the importance of visuals, since this is a talk about storytelling, please let us know. We can go back. We're on your last slide now.
Actually, if you could just move through really quickly from the top, and I'll just comment really quickly on everything. Yeah, so it's really short. And so we're going to go back through really quickly. Again, go ahead and move to the next slide. So again, this was the image from the actual voting from this year. Go ahead and move forward. This is an example of historically where we've been when it comes to the separation and the division of communities, which has really set the precedence for us not being able to come together so quickly, so cohesively in this day and time. I think this is also the piece where I really feel like we started to establish silos and clusters to where we've not necessarily been extremely cohesive nor collaborate or cross-pollinate across boundaries. Go ahead. Again, an image from the civil rights movement. I'm just going to move through these really quickly. So give me like 3 seconds unshoot on each one of those. Okay, this is the older image of Coca-Cola. This is the Outcast piece. This is from 1989, I'm sorry. A picture of the Beltline. Okay. This is a little bit of where you started to see the transition from the older creative with Coca-Cola to really starting to see a lot of those people that have traditionally been excluded from economic opportunity at the corporate level. This is, of course, that cover of 21 Savage. This is CNN Center in the midst of the protests. This is the blight that takes place today, right outside of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You can move forward past that. And then this just kind of reiterates what I said earlier, okay? And then this is a piece from When They See Us. So I'm not going to go back through every single slide. I think we only have 3 or 4 more, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys were able to see that. And I'm happy to post that on LinkedIn so that if anyone wants to kind of go back through it, feel free to.
Thanks so much, Twana. And can we all just give her a virtual round of applause for being so good on her toes in the technical difficulties this morning? And we do have one question in the chat from Paul Carpenter. He asked, are you able to talk about the new project that is supposed to bridge the communities across the connector?
Are there any projects in particular? I'm sorry, I'm assuming he's speaking about the Beltline.
Yes, he says the Stitch.
Okay, so the Stitch is something that is actually a Midtown Alliance project. It's not a Beltline project, so I don't have a lot of details on that, but I think that one of the things that they're trying to also incorporate is not only the building of green spaces, but more spaces that are actually bringing people closer together. And then I think the one thing that everybody has learned from the Beltline is that the Beltline has really pushed and amplified pedestrian traffic patterns. And so that's the Stitch is a huge project in the Midtown area that is really developed or designed to really establish like more safer pedestrian pathways for cyclists and just people who are walking, running, all of those things.
And then we have a question from Brian Goebel. He says, Twana, thank you for your presentation. Could you talk a bit about innovation? Or a bit more about innovation. Many think tech when it comes to innovation, but innovation is also about non-tech innovation, including infrastructure investments. Can you talk about the role of infrastructure innovations like the Beltline that drive increased equity and shared prosperity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So innovation, as I mentioned, I think, for me personally, there's a ton of different definitions for innovation as well. But for me personally, it's the ability to improve humanity. And I think what we see is a really valid example of the Beltline being able to bring communities together to provide alternative sources of transit once it's finalized, right? And totally paved, which we're not expected to be done with that until like 2030. But it's really instrumental that when we look at infrastructure, that we're really tackling the biggest challenges that are taking place in our city. And one of the things that you'll see is that there really isn't any pedestrian friendly streets throughout Atlanta except for the Beltline. And it wasn't brought to my attention until I actually spoke with someone from New York who was saying, I didn't see people walking the streets until I physically went to the Beltline. So you'll start to see more of that infrastructure, whether it be more buildings to develop more economic development. That job creation piece is so incredibly important. The affordable housing that comes along with the density that we're seeing. I think it's also important to see the impacts of the actual pandemic are impacting things like the rate at which people are moving to Atlanta, which was way before we even projected the Beltline, right? And so what we're seeing now is that people are moving to suburbs and moving to smaller markets as opposed to like a Boston or New York or San Francisco, to where the rent and mortgage rates are probably 3 to 5 times greater, right? And so they're coming to Atlanta in floods right now. And I think what we'll see from the actual pandemic is that you'll see that actually expedite and accelerate movement in a way that none of us were prepared for. So you're going to see infrastructure really serve a higher need than it's ever been before. I think the density that's taking place in Midtown, when everybody drives down Spring Street and they're just like, why are all the condos here? I think we're actually going to see that we were ahead of the mark when it came to things like that.
And another question from Alexandria, she asked, how important is it that social entrepreneurs plan to work with government to change policy, since so many issues like blight in communities is due to intentional policies to disenfranchise communities?
Yeah, I think it's really important that social impact starts to really challenge some of the policies that we're dealing with in America overall. I think the work just needs to be done. And I think what's happening right now is we can see an example of Jasmine Crow with Gooder, and the fact that she is not necessarily challenging policy. She's just going out and doing things that she's always done, right? She sees a need, she's creating that opportunity. And I think with that comes, she's actually driving the cultural change that is necessary for policy change to make an impact. So I think that if we start to look at her model and really start to just make the changes and to push the needle and push the envelope in a way that's probably a little uncomfortable for people, but it's really solving a problem that everybody starts to recognize and to champion, I think we'll move a little quicker when it comes to actual policy change.
And a related question from Missy Goss, what role do you see public-private partnerships playing in innovation?
I think they're going to be huge. I think they're going to be huge. And I think that one of the things that I probably underscored just because of all the technical challenges was the role that corporations can play in expediting the nature of impact in our city, right? And so one of the things that we see is we have these conversations that talk about this triple bottom line. But I think the thing that we see moving slowest is the purpose that's actually being incorporated into the community. And so I think that, when you talk about people like Larry Fink, who are like leading that charge and are literally taxing and holding their shareholders responsible for making impactful change in their communities, I think once we start to see more of that, we're going to start to see more change in our communities as well.
And then a question from Shamita Johnson. Could you talk about how intercultural competence in tech brings about innovation?
Oh, that's a whole entire new keynote. But it absolutely is imperative that we're starting to ensure that all voices are represented, all voices, all experiences, all lived experiences are being considered when we're doing these types of projects. So whether that be the Beltline or whether that just be what we're seeing in Atlanta overall, there's technology, and technology by itself is a delivery mechanism that actually expedites change in a really swift way, and it reaches large masses at a time. But one of the things that we can actually do is to start to ensure that we're paying attention to like biases and algorithms. We're starting to see how just policy in general is written in a way that is actually left informed violence towards certain communities, particularly those of color. And I think those are the places where social impact can come in and really make change. But I think the one thing that we have got to, we just can't continue to underscore is that there's a group of people whose voices are not necessarily at the table and they're not being heard right now. And so the more we actually include those individuals, many are from minority backgrounds, I think the swifter we'll be able to make more substantive, measurable change that we can all recognize and benefit from.
Amazing. And then another great question from Paul Carpenter. If there was one thing you and the Beltline need from us, what would that one thing be? A call to action or a lasting remark?
I would say, let me just separate this a little bit. when it comes to the community, I think we just need partnership more than anything else, and to be able to rally individuals for funding. We are not where we need to be when it comes to the funding piece. We're moving forward. We are putting lots of projects in design well ahead of schedule. The money piece, and that's so complicated that I don't want to take a 10-minute, but I'll call you Paul. But I don't want to take a lengthy amount of time to really explain that. But the TAD, which is the Tax Allocation District, is actually supposed to fund the Beltline. And the TAD has just been moving slowly because it's still stuck in like really recovering from the housing crisis of 2008 and so many of the different problems that caused. And we're still playing catch up to that. And so if there's one thing that we need more than anything else, it's funding, quite frankly.
And then I actually have a question for you. So you talk a lot about the potential power of corporations and this movement and telling stories. I wonder, how do you, with corporations tending to leverage or take advantage of moments in time, how do you ensure or help corporations ensure that their storytelling is authentic and genuine and maybe not pulling from cultural moments in a way that could be appropriating or not in the best interest of the community in mind?
I think it's very difficult to tell a story about a group of people that you don't share lived experience with. And so I think that as we start to see what's happening with Hollywood, we'll start to see that move over into the corporate space as well. And those are what's called inclusion writers. And so I think that is those are some of the things right now that are actually being challenged by policy. Right? If a story is about this particular community, what is the percentage of people that are necessary to ensure that those narratives are told in an authentic way that really brings about truth and not necessarily shapes it in a different direction than where it needs to go? And so I think diversity and inclusion, equity, all of those conversations right now are so absolutely critical and paramount. And they're not only important to storytelling, but they're also important to creating economic pathways for people who have traditionally been excluded, but need and have a voice to share at the table to really move things forward. And I think, I'll just say this one thing. Atlanta's greatest export is our culture, right? When you actually get on a plane and go to Australia and you tell somebody you're from Atlanta, we would love for them to say, oh my God, you guys have the busiest airport in the world, or you're like this emerging tech hub. The reality is that 9 times out of 10 people will say the first thing that comes back to you is, how many times have you actually run into outcasts, right? And so those are groups of people who have traditionally and historically been excluded. And so when we start to see them, we don't need to just acknowledge them for their music. We don't need to just acknowledge them for their contributions to that industry. We need to acknowledge that they are entrepreneurs that have never been called entrepreneurs. And they've created economic pathways for many people that look just like them, who never would have gotten into certain spaces had it not been for them. So the hundreds and thousands of people that they've hired over the 20 plus years of their career, we have to understand the impact that they are also too playing. And again, these are social and political activists, and nobody's ever really given them that title. And they're just a couple of the many that have taken place and that have really grown roots in Atlanta and have created our global reputation. So.
No, thank you for that. And since that's a big piece of your new initiatives work, Tribal Good, how can people find out more about Tribal Good?
Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll have some really interesting, it's a coalition, right? And so we're trying to get everybody to the table to really help us expedite storytelling, narrative change in a way that is actually going to start to kind of push the needle a little bit on some uncomfortable policy that is like been pushing creators at the back of the mark when it comes to like owning their own content and their intellectual property. But then above and beyond that, I believe, and I'm a little biased as a career marketer, I'm a little bit biased, but I do believe that we have the ability to change the cultural piece that actually helps to expedite and accelerate the policy change that needs to happen. So follow me on LinkedIn. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at Twana Harrison on all of the different social channels. So feel free to follow me, and you should be hearing some updates really, really soon.
Thank you, Twana, and thank you everyone for sticking around a little over our scheduled time. I wanted to make sure Twana had the space to share many of her wonderful insights. And so thank you guys for joining us for this kickoff conversation. Our other event today is focused on B Corp. So as we talk about how the for-profit industry can think more about impact, that's a great follow-on conversation to what we just heard from Twana. So thank you guys for joining us. We hope you'll stick around this week and see you soon. Thanks again, Twana, for all your wonderful insights.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.